Welcome to Keto Life Support, where we make your keto life sustainable, fun, and low stress. I'm Kim Howerton, and I'll be coming to you weekly with some of my keto besties to bring you the practical, real-world keto advice that you need. Quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, and even if we do have a doctor in the house from time to time, he or she is not your doctor, and nothing we say on this show should be taken as medical advice. Always check in with a trusted medical professional about your own personal medical concerns. Hello, this is Kim Howerton with Keto Life Support, and welcome to show number 56. So on today's episode, it's actually a interview of me. So Carole Freeman, a good friend and keto coach, you can find her at Keto Carole, interviewed me about my experience with reverse dieting. So kind of piggybacking on last week's episode with Robert and Crystal about metabolic adaptation, we're going to kind of continue the topic this week, specifically with an interview that Carole did of me on her channel about my personal experience with reverse dieting. So the tables are a little turned, and Carole did the interviewing and I did the more talking. I mean, not that that's a surprise. I always do a lot of talking, but you know what I mean. So I hope you enjoy this presentation of my interview with Carole Freeman.
Oh, we're live. Oh my gosh.
Hopefully no one heard me just swearing.
Oh, I didn't. So yeah, hopefully no one. My light's weird here. All right. Welcome everyone to our bonus guest expert interview for this month. And my dear friend, keto expert Kim Howerton, has been doing a really cool self-experiment. And it's the information, I just had to share it with you all. So I'm so grateful she said yes when I invited her to come on and share what she's been doing, because she could just keep all these secrets to herself. Welcome, Kim. First off, will you just tell a little bit of your backstory? I met Kim probably almost 6 years ago now. Was it at the first low carb conference in San Diego? I don't remember.
Probably maybe 5. I don't know. Yeah. I've been keto for about 5 years, so that's why I think it's probably more like 5.
Okay.
I am a keto coach, and I'm somebody who has gone through my own sort of keto journey and found that I was a life coach actually before I found keto. And when I went keto, what I found was it was such a pivotal, life transforming piece that I really felt like I had to sort of turn my skills and attention to helping people on their keto journeys. And so that's what I did. And, but just like a lot of us, right, we're on our own journey as we're on a journey with other people. And so there have been twists and turns and things I've learned along the way that I didn't know when I first started. And so it's always evolving.
Oh, that's so great. Would you mind sharing a little bit more of like pre-keto, like weight journey struggles, just so that the ladies who are watching will be like, oh yeah, she gets where we're at.
Oh yeah. Like, I usually say like, I was not like when I was designed, they forgot to put in the easy button, like everything was hard for me, especially around my health, my weight. I actually had my first surgery when I was 5 years old.
Oh
and
my gosh.
I've had not weight related, but like, I've had like over 3 surgeries, major surgeries. I've had a lot of health issues. I had PCOS, I have hypothyroidism, chronic depression. Like I have had a lot of health struggles. And before keto, I've been struggling with my weight since I was in single digit ages and had very early puberty. I'm tall, but, so I was tall, young, but I was also wide. And so I struggled, my whole life with feeling both like from an emotional standpoint of just like feeling comfortable in my body, but then also just literally like feeling uncomfortable in my body because my body was kind of an uncomfortable place to live. But then in my late 30s, my weight just sort of accelerated. So I'd always been, heavy, chubby, little big, but like, unfortunately in today's society, kind of average yet overweight, but it felt like a big deal to me. But when I go out in the world, I'm like, oh yes, you are my people. And then I got to my late 30s, and suddenly it was like I was on the expressway to like bedridden obesity, and I was just gaining weight at a more and more rapid clip. And I was like, I got to do something about this. All my life it had been like, I got to do something about this. I want to look better. And then I just kind of hit a point where I was like, oh, I got to do something about this. I'm going to die. Like that, like not tomorrow, but like soonish, and, sooner than I want to. And probably in a way that is more embarrassing and ego killing than I also want to, And so I just finally kind of got my ish together, as I say, and it was like, I should do something. So I found a program that was, in fact, it turns out low carb, but it wasn't like keto. And it was very restrictive and it was very regimented. And I am a rebellious sort. I'm also a foodie. So I did lose weight, but then I regained almost all of it. But in that time period, I learned more about like what I could do to lose weight. And I got curious about why that worked for me a little bit, to be able to lose some weight. And I found out about keto during that time. It was sort of like 15, 16. And I kind of learned about keto and I was like, oh, maybe, this scientifically makes sense to me. Let's give it a try. And I did. And it was great. It was amazing. I had big changes. I lost, about 60 pounds in my first year. I was trying, but I wasn't like trying. I wasn't like white knuckling it anymore. It was like, it was just working. And so that was amazing. And then, roundabout though, year 2.5, 3, like, it was slowing down, stopping, regaining. Like, I was like, what is going on here? So I had to kind of do some investigation around how I was approaching my approach and, and what was and wasn't working for me anymore.
Yes. And I think thank you for sharing all that. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people are in the same boat. Like I'm seeing a lot of influencers coming forward saying, hey, it worked really well. And now it's kind of like, all right, confession time. Things are starting to slip and it's time to look at some other protocols. And I don't think it's any secret at this point because she's putting it out on our blog, but we talked to Christy Sullivan this weekend.
Yeah.
And she's been developing some higher protein protocols for Diet Doctor and also future cookbook coming, right? Probably no surprise, but same thing for her, lost a significant amount and then it stopped working and the weight gain starts. And so she's at the same time, so it's kind of this mass thing that's happening right now where people are looking at like, all right, it takes more than just one diet.
Right. I think, I can totally get how frustrating the world is. For a lot of people, and this was certainly like my experience. When I first found some success on keto, I felt like I found the Holy Grail. I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I'm not broken. This actually works. I can actually see progress. I'm not like stuck in this body that is in pain and has to take all these medications and then though a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people kind of hit a wall at some point on their keto journey, and I was not exempt from said wall, and I had to really delve into what was going on. And so that was about 2 years ago that I was. Well, the troubles started more than 2 years ago, but about 2 years ago, I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm not doing this again. Like, the definition of insanity is Kim Howerton. Like, it was just like, they say like, you keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. So I just sort of embarked on some investigation. I tried this, I tried that, I tried this, I tried that, what worked, what didn't. And interestingly, things that I tried years ago that didn't work eventually started working. So there's a lot of nuance that I think we aren't looking at in the keto world. But the emotion that I see a lot of people struggling with, myself included, the best way I can describe it is you get to a place where you almost feel betrayed. Like
Yeah.
I felt betrayed by my keto, that
Mm,
like keto made me a promise
yeah.
that it was going to work, and then it stopped working, and it's like, what the heck? So yeah, so I had to deal with that too, just like that feeling of feeling
Mm.
completely abandoned by the one thing that I had learned to begin to have fledgling hope in again, and then it dumped me.
Well, yeah, and a lot of my ladies say things too, like, well, if this doesn't work, then what? Right? Like, this
Right,
is my
right.
last hope, and if this doesn't work, does that mean I just have to give up?
Right. And no, the answer is no. I
Yay.
will too long don't read no.
Yeah.
But it's not as clear cut as we want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just simple as lower your calories some more, which is kind of leading into this next topic, right?
Yeah, sure. Lead the way.
Okay, so, well, and I remember back, it was probably about a couple of years ago, where I know you've always been meticulous in your journaling and logging food and tracking and all that kind of stuff. So this wasn't a matter of like Kim just got lazy or anything like that. But I remember
For the most part.
Yeah. There's times I call it like you're taking a whitewater river rafting trip, and there's times where we just want to enjoy the view. Like, it's not rocky, we just want to coast along. So I don't think that's lazy. That's just enjoying the journey. But I remember you reflecting on the fact that at your whatever the body weight was, that you burn less calories. You knew you burned less calories than some other people that were your same body weight, and that was frustrating, which I can appreciate.
Yeah.
It would be. So is that kind of where things started, where you just were like, why was my body burning less calories than someone else?
Well, you know what? I didn't actually put it together at that time. But in hindsight, I think the issue was, I think there was a variety of issues that came together at that moment. But I got my resting metabolic rate tested at one point.
Yeah.
When I'd been stalled for like a year at this point when I got this done. And it came back saying my resting metabolic rate was like a ridiculously low number, like half of what it should be. But it was so low that I was like, there's got to be a mistake. There's got to be, like, that can't be right. You know, one of the things that kept happening, it's funny, I've heard this story a few times from clients now. They kept coming back into the room saying like, you're asleep. And I'd be like, I am not asleep. Like, my metabolism was so slow that I was barely registering as having an autonomic nervous system. Like, it was, I think, quite honestly, like, I think it was a little bit wrong. But at the same time, it could have been, and it wasn't, but it could have been a wake-up call. But what I eventually learned on my journey is, when I first got into keto, I was told by many people more keto knowledgeable than me. I'm not pointing a finger at Carol. She was not one of the people that told me this. And I don't know if you heard this, Carol. Maybe you heard.
I can't wait to hear what it is.
That you can't. So there's something people call, and I don't like this term, but that starvation mode will only happen on a high carb diet. That you can't eat too little on a ketogenic or low carb diet because your body fat will fill in the difference in terms of what you're eating and keep your metabolic rate up. I was told this.
I never heard that specifically, but I think I can see, I totally believe you, but also I can see where it's kind of implied, right? Like,
right.
Well, you don't need to eat a lot of fat because
it's coming from your body fat.
The weird body math they would do about how it still beats 100% of your caloric needs. It's like, nah, okay.
Right. So there's a Finney chart that kind of says, it doesn't say what I said in words, but people use that chart to kind of say what I said. And people had actually said this to me, like, oh, you can't go into starvation mode. You can't eat too little on keto because of this. And then I was like, oh, okay, great, super.
What I'd also heard just in general that starvation mode isn't even a thing, no matter what diet.
Well, and that's why I don't like the term, because it's not a good term. But there is something that is indeed a better term. It's sort of like when people talk about like adrenal fatigue, and really it's like, well, let's talk about like HPA access. They're touching on something, but the deeper thing is what you need to know. And so there is something bodies do. Bodies are designed to do it. It's adapt. We are adaptation machines. We would not still be the dominant species if we weren't adaptation machines. That's what we do. We adapt. You know, there's no meat. Okay, well, we can survive on vegetables. Oh, there's no food. That's okay. We can turn our metabolism down so that we don't die. And so we're designed to adapt. And so that's the truth behind what people talk about as starvation mode, right? And so when you feed a body less and less, your body learns to survive on less and less. And so what had happened to me was I was eating less and less. And I wasn't losing any weight. And I see this in my clients. I have a client right now who's OMAD 600 calories a day and is not losing any weight.
I have a lady very close to the same. And the first thing is like, well, make sure you're recording all your food. And she says, I absolutely am. And I'm like, okay.
Right. And there's a point at which a lot of people out there in the world will just call that person a liar. Right. They must be sleep eating. They must be, you know, X, Y. And I'm like, look, there's one meal going on. Like, there's not that many places to hide food here.
Right.
And so, you know, what I ended up doing is talking to Robert Sykes. You know Robert, right?
Yeah.
Savage.
Real quick, before we go there, can we kind of talk about like what are the signs or symptoms that someone has that lets them know that they're in metabolic adaptation, that their metabolic rate has slowed down in accordance with their low calorie eating?
What I can tell you is the good news is we're all in metabolic adaptation.
Okay.
So everyone at all times is experiencing this phenomenon. However, the effects of this phenomenon are different. If you're somebody that eats a ton all the time, your metabolism has adapted to more calories. If you are somebody who eats very little, there you go. It is just something that happens to everybody. Now, it intertwines with other factors, how active you are, not just how much muscle mass you have, how much you fidget, how much eat, how much, all these things that are going on in your body. But one of the things that influences all of this is in the mix is under or overeating.
Okay. Well, and I was referring more specifically to not just metabolic adaptation in general, but the place you're at where you just can't lose any weight and you're eating very little.
The metabolic brick wall.
So what I see in people, and let me know if you have more than this, but like I just see those are the people that they don't have that like amazing keto energy. They feel cold all the time, especially like their hands and feet are cold, and they just don't have a zip to get up and do any exercise or anything like that. Maybe even starting to the point where they're starting to have a little bit of mental fogginess and
totally those will happen.
Okay.
They're also just like, you know, a lot of people are like, I feel like exercising when and these people never feel like or rarely feel like exercising.
Right.
You know, their energy is not there. Some of them, that's true. And some of them, they manage to feel fairly energetic. So there are always exceptions to the rule. Okay. But ultimately, I think the thing to really look at is, have you felt like in your weight loss, you've been hitting a brick wall for a long time?
Okay.
And when you start looking at your caloric intake, it's very, very low, not very, very high. And you're being honest with yourself. Like you're not estimating, you're actually accurately measuring and tracking. I do have both. I have clients that come to me that they're like, I can't figure out why I can't lose weight. And then when I start having them track, and I usually get an email that's like, I have figured out why I cannot lose weight. Like, it's like, oh, okay, I had it. But then I have others where like they send me their logs and I'm like, well, yikes. That adds up to a very low amount of calories. And it's not 100% not all about calories. Like it's not. It's just that calories are a unit of measure. And in this instance, they're a very useful unit of measure because they measure your overall energy intake.
Right. And I see this as a problem of most diet interventions out there that focus purely on calorie intake.
Yeah.
And a lot of the ladies I'm working with, probably the same for you, is that they decades of following this diet and that diet that told them how many calories they could eat. And they followed that to every single calorie. And then their body adapted to whatever that calorie level was. And then the next diet, the only way you could lose weight is to eat less than that. Or once you hit a plateau on that diet, the only way to lose more is to get back. So you end up with 800 calories. And then you end up with these crazy HCG diets where you only eat 600 calories a day.
Times 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. On a special occasion, you get a green bean. It's nutso. And so, yes, most of the women, quite honestly, let's be honest, most women, period, have been dieting their whole lives, but most of the women I talk to have as well. So one of the things that I really had to look at, because it was like sort of a bell went off in my head, when I was evaluating the fact that I've been told like, oh, this won't happen on keto. You won't have this effect of your metabolism slowing. There are some studies that have shown that keto can have some positive increase in metabolic rate, right? That may very well be true, but you still can continually eat too little. And then the other part that I thought about, which finally was like a big light bulb went off, is like, when they say, oh, because this much of your body fat is now being used for energy, for fuel, because you're burning it and that's why you're losing weight. That's true of every type of diet. Anyway, it's true of every diet. If you've lost weight, you have, granted, you can lose muscle mass, but usually when you lose weight, you lose some body fat. And so it's like, oh, that's not only keto that there's body fat. So it suddenly I was like, put the pieces together. But, definitely keto has many benefits in terms of like how much body fat versus muscle you lose and metabolic rate, like all sorts of things. There, hands down, is still an amazing tool that I utilize in my life and in my clients' lives, but it's short-sighted to not think you need to know anything beyond eat low carb.
All right. Well, let's go back to the Robert Sykes.
Sure.
Which, for those of you who don't know, Robert is a young bodybuilder. I know he used to live in Washington State, and where are they now? Arkansas, Tennessee?
Arkansas. Okay. He's from Arkansas, so they moved back to Arkansas. Keto Savage, aka Robert Sykes, that's his real name, is a good friend, and he is a bodybuilder, a natural bodybuilder. So he goes through these cycles of, building more muscle, losing more body fat, so he and I were talking, and he told me about something called a reverse diet. And I was like, what is a reverse diet? And it comes to find out that this is something that all bodybuilders have to do, because he explained, you go on what they call a cut, which you can look at as a diet, what we often call a diet or a weight loss phase, where they're preparing maybe for a show, and they're trying to cut as much body fat as possible. So they'll be eating, less and less and less over this period of time, so that they can continue to drop more body fat. But at the end of their cut, well, there are two ways that bodybuilders do this. They either just go to town and gain like 30 pounds in 3 days, or the intelligent way they end a cut is like they will do something called a reverse. So if you think of a cut as going sort of stair steps down in how much you're eating, a reverse is literally the reverse. It's stair stepping up to eat more and more, so that you now have kind of reversed out of that significant deficit. And then they enter a phase that we would all call maintenance, which is they've gotten to a point where now they're eating quite a bit more, and they're at a place where they're neither gaining nor losing weight, and they're going to continue on that path for a while. And then they might go into something called, a bulk, when they're trying to put on a bunch of muscle, where they're actually increasing the amount they're eating above maintenance in order to add more body mass. So he explained these phases to me.
Okay.
And he suggested that I try a reverse diet.
And you're like, I'm not a bodybuilder.
Right? Not in any way. Well, not in any good way anyway.
Well, and I'll just acknowledge some people listening right now be like, okay, so this isn't me, because I don't want to lift a bunch of weights. But wait, hold on.
Don't leave. Because the concept actually applies to everyone, not just a bodybuilder. Now, bodybuilders are really good at it because they're kind of machines and they have to make this work. This is their career. But what he explained was adaptation. And if you've adapted to very, very low intake, I explain it this way. If you're already in the basement, our only options at that point to get you down below ground floor is like to pull out a jackhammer, which, is like lopping off some body parts, right? Like we are now, it is going to be really challenging to get you any lower. Whereas if we're on the third or fourth floor, well, we can just take the stairs down for a little while again. You can kind of think again, that stair step idea. A reverse diet is acknowledging you might be in the basement. Now, you don't have to wait till you get to the basement, but most people's first reverse, they're in the basement.
Okay.
And then how do I get out of the basement? How do I get enough height here so that I can see progress again? The trick is in a well-controlled reverse, you have to be well-controlled, which means you're not binging. It's a very just like well-nuanced program where you're going to be eating a little bit more and then a little bit more and then a little bit more in an effort not to just, because if you're eating 900 calories and then tomorrow you start eating 1800 calories, you're going to gain weight like there's no tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But if you, and I know this sounds crazy town, people, I get it, that this is not your experience, but if you do it properly, you can get from 900, 1200 calories up to 1800 calories and not see any significant weight gain if you do it gradually. You will see a little.
Everybody's in a hurry. We need to do this tomorrow.
Right. And if you've been dieting most of your life, a good reverse might take 6 months.
Okay. That's good for people to hear. Let's just repeat that.
Yeah.
It's going to take time. If you've been dieting for 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 years, can you give yourself 6 months to give yourself some metabolic healing and reverse metabolic adaptation?
Right. The thing I would like to remind you of, if you're this person who's like, I cannot do something that's going to take 6 months. I got to get this taken care of. I've been stalled for 2 years. I would like you to evaluate that thought process, because there is, what is this parable? Like Stephen Covey used to tell this story. Do you know the Saw story?
No, I don't think so. But maybe once you say it,
So this guy's walking in the forest and he comes across a lumberjack who's trying to saw down a tree.
Okay.
And he looks over and this guy is just like going at it and going at it and going. And like, there's no cut is happening in the tree. And the guy was like, dude, you have to sharpen your saw because your saw is not cutting. And the lumberjack says, I'm on a deadline. I cannot stop to take the time to sharpen my saw because I'm on a deadline. And the guy's like, well, but you're going to miss your deadline because your saw is doing nothing. And he's like, I cannot stop. So it's the same thing. Like, ladies, gentlemen, what you're doing, if it's not working, it's probably worth the time to fix it rather than to just keep, I don't know, beating your head against a wall.
Oh, this is so powerful. I know, because so many people think that they're broken and they do keto and they're eating 600 calories a day and they're like, okay, see, even keto won't work for me. Right. And it's not that. It's we've got to heal the body a little bit, or at least it's not even about healing, right? It's actually the amazing machine the body is, the fact that we live on that little.
Yeah. And it could be multiple things, right? Because one of the reasons could be your thyroid is wacky. It could be, you know, you have zero testosterone. But let me tell you, if you're eating 600 calories, your thyroid's going to be wacky and you're going to have very little testosterone. So you might be able to heal some of the hormonal imbalances just by properly nourishing yourself. And then you can also address along the way. Maybe there are some things like supplements or some treatments that you need to do to address some specific things that are going on. But it's like if you're not nourishing your body properly, nothing's going to work well. Anyway.
Yeah. So it only goes to reason then that there's going to be a lot of long-term consequences, or even like a bunch of other symptoms that somebody's going to be having at that stage, like hair loss and skin issues and hormonal issues and all kinds of stuff. If you're
sarcopenia, you know, things like that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So can you share a little bit more then about so as you started to digest Keto Savage's
advice
information? Yeah. How'd you start to apply that yourself?
I actually was like, I'm taking a year off. I'm going to stop trying to lose weight for a year. Now, I think some people 6 months might be enough, but I was just like, let's go a year. Let's do it. So I just took my brain. I was like, we are not trying to lose weight. We're just not. And I just thought, well, what do I need to eat to be properly nourished? Looking at micronutrients, macronutrients. How's my sleep? How's my stress? Like, how is everything working in my life? And decided to focus on health instead of just fat loss. And over that year, kind of went from probably about 1,100 calories a day. There were exceptions. I will say, like, I didn't gain weight on 1,100 calories a day. What would happen is I would eat that way for weeks at a time, and then I kind of get a little screw up moment. And I wouldn't go off keto, but I would eat more for a week or 2 or 3 weeks. I would do that thing where you went from 1,100 to 2,000, and I would gain 2 pounds there, and then I gained another. And so I had gained some weight that I didn't want to have. But then I went back to 11, and I wasn't losing weight. And so I ended up walking my way up to about 1,900 calories a day on average over that year. What was interesting was about a year ago, we were about to start the shelter in place order. It was a little more than a year ago at this point, a year and a month. And I was like, now seems a good time to implement the cut. Okay. I'm going to be at home. Yeah. I'm not going to be eating out. I'm not going to be traveling for a while. And so I started eating less again, but intentionally and consciously, while keeping my protein fairly high at that point. And I ended up going what I would call moderate fat, high protein. Although I would shrug a little when I say high protein. I consider it higher protein than most ketoers were eating at the time, although it has caught on at this point. And so it's now what someone might call protein-based keto or high protein keto or something like that. And so what I found over the next couple of months when I did that is I lost without much effort. Now, when I say without much effort, I missed butter, I still had some, but I missed sort of being liberal with butter. We had a much closer relationship at one time. And ribeye was less on the menu and flank steak was more and things like that. I lost 15 pounds pretty easily, though, with just those changes. And then I took my own advice and said, let's not keep doing this for a long time, shall we? And I did a short reverse. More like 3 to 4 months reverse, and then a little while at kind of a maintenance level. And then went into another cut phase and lost another 15 pounds. So over the last year, ended up losing 30 pounds. I'm now in another reverse at this point with the desire to lose another 15 pounds in the next year.
That is an amazing story. I just love how you biohacked your body. And so how does it make you feel at this point? Like, I know a couple of years ago, you were just so frustrated with your body and you had pretty good health markers compared to some of us that weighed less, and
my insulin was low. I had ketoed my way out of insulin resistance. I was insulin sensitive and stuck and not losing weight. And I was at that point, I didn't really care if I was insulin sensitive because I just wanted to lose weight. But when I came to my senses, I was actually glad that I am metabolically healthy and, a lot of these things worked. But it does, that is to your point that different seasons require different coats, right? Like when I was early in my keto years, I tried what some now would know more as the PE approach, more Ted Naiman's kind of 3-to-1, or, it's very high protein comparatively to the fat approach. And I did not see real success there. I saw more success with more, not completely traditional keto, but a little higher fat than that. And I really think it's a question of where you are on that insulin resistance sort of highway, that's that spectrum. And so I think the right approach is very dependent on where you are on your journey.
Do you think then, because PE, protein, or the 3-to-1, 3 grams of protein to 1 gram of fat. So I know that bodybuilders use that technique, but based on what you said, that's like the very last maybe week or two that they're cutting, they're going to do that. They don't do that their whole cut.
Well, I mean, it depends on the bodybuilder,
Okay,
right?
okay.
Some bodybuilders are high carb bodybuilders, and they're generally low fat bodybuilders. But somebody like Robert is a keto bodybuilder, so he's high fat the whole time, but that's relatively high fat. But the total amount of fat is dropping, but the total amount of food is also dropping. So for him, his percentage that's protein, percentage that's fat are actually fairly consistent. It's just the total calories that are dropping.
Okay.
But
right.
other bodybuilders will, in their cut period, you'll know them by the odor of broccoli and chicken breast, because that's all they're eating in their cut. Whereas they might be eating more fat and other carbs in their bulk cycles. Not that I'm an expert on such things.
This is so fascinating too, because I know there are people out there that think that Robert is lying about what he does. And it makes so much sense now what you're talking about. And I know there are people that are like, no, he's not really eating what he says he is. And it's just funny that everybody's got their little thing of like their little pet beliefs that like they look at their corner of the world of dieting, nutrition, health, and weight loss. And like you said, like, you've got to start gathering all these other pieces of the puzzle, because you and I have enough experience for ourselves, but also for everybody else we worked with. We know like one thing doesn't work forever, and not all the way to goal and not all the way through maintenance. That's a lot of times why people need a coach, because they don't know what to apply, or, which tool do I use with that lug nut? I've never seen that one before.
I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people would say that Robert is, but it's hilarious because there is actually, I have never met a more like earnest and honest person than Robert. And I've stayed in houses with him at various times. Like he traveled, like I will tell you, the last time I stayed with him right before the pandemic started, we were staying in an Airbnb. He traveled from Arkansas with a cooler of pre-packed food for the whole week, because he is such a stickler about sticking to his macros during cuts, and he was in a cut, that he literally brought a checked cooler of like bison so that he could have these very dialed in meals measured in. And, when you learn more about the cycles of how he approaches it, like, he eats more protein than a lot of people in some seasons of his time, but then in his cuts, he'll eat less. So, it's not like he's not, people will look at a snapshot of time and think, oh, they do that all the time. That's not what's happening. Not to speak for Robert.
I'm trying, as you're talking, I'm coming up with more questions. I'm trying to jot them all down so I make sure.
Okay, no problem.
Get to. So the other question that came to my mind then is that, a lot of people I've talked to that have been on their keto journey and that have, modified things, maybe gotten a little higher protein later on. There's still a consensus that early on, especially for very insulin resistant people, that high fat keto is very effective. Do you think that the 3-to-1 approach, do you have a sense of, because I know for me, like I'm somebody who struggles with really high insulin despite doing all, the right things. Obviously there's more healing I need to do, but I could do a 3-to-1 and it was always very effective for me. It would rapidly lose weight.
And that's what kind of tweaks the brain a little bit, because it worked for you, but I have clients and in myself, it didn't really work well. And so I attribute that to the level of insulin resistance they have, but maybe there are some other factors going on. The good news is we have access to ourselves and we have access to food. And so we're all our own N of one. And there's very little harm in trying a dietary approach for 30 days and seeing what the effect is so that you can decide where to go from there.
So I'm just with all the information we discussing this here and our own journeys, I'm starting to lean towards the fact that, just metabolic rate itself indicates how easy it is for somebody to lose weight or not, independent of insulin. Now, insulin being high for somebody can make it so they've shut off their fat burning, like their body is like not allowing fat to come out of the cells,
Right.
all those, enzymes and cellular membrane stuff and all that kind of stuff that needs to be made in order to burn fat for fuel has been shut off in a lot of people. Ketosis is a way of insulin comes down a bit and then fat can come out and start to be burned and make ketones and things like that. And for me, that was like a dramatic energy coming online and all kinds of stuff, right? But my insulin has never been like even low normal.
Right.
As far
It's
as, like,
interesting.
in the keto world. Yeah. So, but I've always had a fairly high metabolic rate. I'd never really cut down, like even in my first major keto weight loss journey, which the first 6 months of keto for me, I was probably around 1,500 calories a day, which isn't really low. It's probably half of what I was eating before, maybe, but I don't know. I never went down to, like only 1,100 or 1,000 or something like that. And then I kind of just ate whatever I wanted. So I didn't have that metabolic adaptation to a lower level. So I wonder if that's more like, it's just kind of blowing my mind too, because always thinking insulin was the key. You got to insulin low,
right?
And metabolic rate is also got to come into play here. So
I think it's a combination of factors. So, fat cell, how you lose body fat, right? Your viewers probably used to this discussion, but you can kind of think that a fat cell there are 2 indoors and 1 outdoor, right? You get like new fat and recycled fat in the fat cell. And then you've got lipolysis, that fat being used for energy.
Did you listen to Peter Attia's recent podcast about the fat flux?
I did.
Okay.
And so if you, and I have the chart, he talked about a chart where it showed like where your insulin is versus how much lipolysis you could have. And I've had that chart for a while. Actually, Ted Naiman actually put that chart up at some point about 4 years ago. And so I've had that chart in my notes. And it does look like, and in my talk with Ben Bickman on my podcast the other day, he even said, if you're fasting insulin or your insulin at any point is really above 10, while it's over that level, that lipolysis is pretty slowed down or mostly stopped. So it makes you a head scratcher a bit, right? Like, whether you're eating a lot or a little, that door is supposedly not so open if you're insulin resistant, if your fasting insulin is regularly over that, if you're not giving your body time below that threshold. So there's that factor. And then the second factor, which they are, all mixed up together, but you have to think that if you're used to eating a lot and you went through a period of time where those fat cells were getting more and more and more stuffed and you simply stop stuffing them as full, that will have an effect in and of itself, at least that you're not going to be gaining more weight. And then, so that's one part of the factor. But, I think it's far more complicated than anyone really understands. You got the people saying it's all about insulin. You got the people saying it's all about calories. And I'm like, well, you're both right and you're both wrong. In my opinion, we all have our own, is that there's something in the middle where we really need to be more, where we need to live. That's
one of the things I really appreciated about Peter Attia's podcast was like, oh, finally somebody's looking at, there's a lot of pieces. And he was the one, I was looking through my notes trying to find, because when you mentioned stress and sleep, and I think there were a couple other ones that he mentioned as well that play into that whole picture of what's going to affect your metabolic rate and your net fat flux.
Right. And then if you listen to like people like Tommy Wood, he'll talk about that even things like gut dysbiosis can affect insulin levels, if I'm remembering correctly. But anyway, but like all these different factors can come into play in terms of, what your insulin might be doing, because some people will be like, I eat 0 carb. What is going on with the fact that I can't lose weight and my insulin's still high? And, sometimes it's about other things than what you put in your mouth.
Yeah. Well, just when we thought we got to, it's like they say in any niche of knowledge, the more you know, the more questions you have, the more you feel like you don't know. So it's a fun place to be, I think, actually, because I got to admit there was a place where I was just like, all right, I know it all. This is boring. I mean, not that I got bored of helping people, but it was just kind of like, so I'm looking forward to, maybe next year when things open up and we can have conferences again, maybe we can actually have new topics to discuss and new controversial things about the higher protein keto. And oh, do you remember back in the 5 years ago when there was the OKL, the living, and how controversial they were?
I am going to tell you that I was like, those people are bad. They tell you to eat all this protein, and that's so like, I mean, I'm going to say, like, thank God somebody put out there that quote that, if you're a smart person, you can admit you're wrong. Because I've had to admit that I was wrong when I first started keto. And then I regurgitated a lot of information that I heard about keto. I no longer think that those things are actually true. Some of them.
Yeah. No, I think I was right there with you. Like, oh no, I calculated my macros, OKL, and no, that's garbage. That's way too high protein. That's not keto. There was the protein bros and the I don't know, something else rhymes with that. That's not very nice to say, but no.
I don't know. But I mean, like, I will say that just because somebody finds value in eating in a different way than you do does not give you the right to be a dick. So that goes on in this world. I don't even like there's a statement out there that's, if you have body fat, if you have high body fat, you only need the LC, you don't need the HF, right? People said that. And I would just like to say, like, if you are working in the weight loss space, you have to be aware that you're talking to a population that has been bullied, demeaned, treated really horribly, maybe their whole life for their weight. And you have to think that their ears are sensitized to hear things in a much more aggressive tone than maybe you ever intended. And just you have to speak knowing that your audience needs to hear you. Like, it's not about creating the most brilliant sound bite where you sound so funny and, it's such a like zinger. It's like, no, like, do you want to help people or do you not want to help people? Like, say it in a way that acknowledges that people have scars here. And I'm not talking about treating people like snowflakes. I'm talking about, being like a decent human being.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it.
Yeah. Amen.
Thank you. That's a little soapbox for you.
Amen, sister. Oh my gosh. Okay. So many more questions. I think that kind
rapid fire.
Yeah. So now that you've kind of like experimented on yourself with this, you're starting to do some of this work with your clients. And what are you seeing that way?
I run a group called Keto Unstuck.
Okay.
With the idea that essentially it's like, if your easy button is broken, then you might need this. And it specifically delves into some of these topics that I talked about today.
Okay.
It works with people sort of like on an individualized kind of, some people are this, some people are that. Like it doesn't assume that I know what you need without some feedback from you. And as I've worked with people through that program, I have seen in the last round, I would say of the close to 100 people in it, I believe we had 4 people that didn't see some fat loss. And those are people that up at the beginning of the program, I said, I think you need longer than this program to reverse.
Okay.
And not everyone in the program reversed. Not everyone needed that. But I did say to some people, this is going to be a longer process for you. And are you in or out? Because you have to buy in. If you don't buy in, I'm not going to force anybody.
Yeah. We'll have to keep telling that Stephen Covey story of the
the saw.
Stop and sharp. You have to stop and sharp. Oh, I can't even say that. Stop and sharpen the saw occasionally if you want to actually go faster. Last night on a coaching call, one of my clients said this phrase that I'd never heard before, and I'm just in love with it, is the long way is the shortest way. So meaning if you're always trying to find shortcuts, it's going to take you longer than if you just go down the proven path. So this is true, right? Of what you're just talking about is the fact that, like, stop trying to take shortcuts. If you can't lose weight on 600 calories a day, you've got to stop and sharpen your saw.
Right.
And so that you can meet your future deadlines, because it's actually going to be faster than continuing to eat only 600 calories a day and not lose anything. So
Right. I mean, if you had told me in the midst of my lowest point of my stall, hey, a year from now, you're going to lose 30 pounds in 1 year, I would be like, you're kidding. Like,
Yeah.
that's no.
You're like, I'm not going to eat 300 calories a day.
Right. Like, and I know for some of you it'd be like 30 pounds is not a lot, Kim, but like when you have not lost any weight really in years, it's a lot.
Yeah, I know it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I know it's a lot. So yeah.
I'm down now a total from start of keto of around 85 pounds at this point. So that's exciting. Yeah.
Well, and you lost a lot, but you gained more knowledge. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's
absolutely. If it was easy, I would be boring.
Born again? Oh, that's different.
No, that's different. I mean, I would be like a lawyer. What would I have to do if everything wasn't hard for me? I'd have nothing to teach.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love it.
My dad would like that if I was a lawyer, but
This is so great. Yeah, I learned a ton, and I just love this so much. I'm trying to think of like how to recap. Basically, we talked about your journey and how, hit a brick wall of, seeing no weight loss for around 4 years maybe, and just kind of the pieces of putting the puzzle together of figuring it out for you. And that involved getting some metabolic adaptation in the reverse way, reversing the metabolic adaptation that you had that caused your metabolism to slow down so much. Learning from a bodybuilder, not necessarily that you have to do any weightlifting, but you can use the same techniques of
the weightlifting is great for all of us. So
yeah,
everyone should lift something heavy.
Does this mean that's the next journey of Kim? Are you going to go into this?
I've been doing a little bit of resistance training, but yes, in fact, I've been saying it, and hopefully I won't be a liar. I am actually currently thinking, as the world is opening back up, that I'll actually use the gym membership I pay too much money for. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That'll be great. Yeah. Well, and that fits with one of the symptoms being, because I know before you were just not a fan of exercise. Like, it was just like, nah.
I just hate it.
Yeah.
And I just don't like it.
The theory of like, well, if your metabolic rate's high enough, you can't fight it. You just want to go do something. So we'll see if Kim enters the Keto Savage weightlifting team here soon or something. So
I think bikini competitions are probably not on the agenda, but it would be nice to be able to keep up at least with my athletic boyfriend on the weekend.
There you go. Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, well, and just for fun or just more information, like, so 30 pounds in the last year, have you noticed anything else? Like anything else change for you? Health-wise or related?
I mean, it's been such a weird year, Carol. It's been a really weird year. I've noticed I'm home a lot. It's interesting that, I'm a big foodie. I love food. And I got a little weirded out. I still loved food, but part of what I do is I create recipes. And when I was in sort of the more intense cut periods, I wasn't that into recipes. I'd be like, and then I put some cottage cheese in a bowl, and I was sort of almost like, oh, maybe I'm getting less foodie. And then, but in my recent reverse now that I'm in now, I'm like, and then I'll cook this, and then I'll cook, it's rhubarb season. So like that sort of interest in food is back. And so it's kind of fun to kind of have seasonality to that. Like be like, I'm in an eating season and then I'm in a cutting season.
Yeah. Well, and it's probably gives people a lot of hope too, to know that like, oh no, you don't have to like diet forever, that you can have these periods of enjoying some recipes and being creative in the kitchen. Cause I know a lot of my
diet fatigue is real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anything else that you want to share? Any other tips or insights you've gained?
I would say, there are a lot of people, like one of the keys to my success has really been getting really consistent with tracking, because it's really hard to adjust something if you don't have good data to base your decisions on. And that tweaks a lot of people out. They don't like the idea of tracking. They like to fly by the seat of their pants. And I would just like to say that a period of tracking, you don't have to think about it being for life, but a period of tracking, a spot check, if you will, can be very helpful behavior to give you the kind of feedback you might need to check, right? Like I have people that come to me that say, I don't think I'm eating enough, and they're eating plenty. And then I have other people that say, I'm eating so much, I can't eat anymore, and they're not eating nearly enough. And so, if you're just going based on how you feel and not based on any measurements like that you can base in reality, not that your feelings aren't real, but like you need data. And so I would say, even if you hate tracking, try and find a place in yourself where for at least a temporary period of time, you can do it, because you can't fix what you don't understand.
That's so key. You're right. Like the whole foundation of all of this is that if you got to know where you're starting, and to do these stair steps, you have to track. You can't guess the stair steps and up or down. Yeah. That's good. That's great. Very important.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, what's the best way people can find you?
Well, you can find me at kimhowerton.com. No crazy surprise spellings in that. And you can also find me on social media at The Ketonist, which is crazy spelling, but it's The Ketonist, all one word, The Ketonist. It's a combination of keto and hedonist, if anybody cared. And then if you are interested in my program for people that are metabolically confused, you can sign up for the waiting list at KU, the letter K, the letter U, .kimhowerton.com.
All right. Big round of applause for our guests. Thank you so much. And thanks for teaching us all some valuable things and sharing your journey so that all the rest of us continue to heal too on our journey. So
sounds good.
Thanks for being here.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye,
Have a good day.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Keto Life Support. Want more information? Want show notes? Want to suggest a topic? Just head over to ketolifesupport.com. That's where all that kind of thing can go on. By the way, I have a request. If you could go to your podcast host and hit subscribe, we would really, really appreciate it. And what would be even more awesome is if you could write a review. And what would be even more awesome than that is if you could write like a really flattering review. Just asking, you do you. All right. So thanks so much for joining us.